The morning that changed everything. My name is Mike Tyson. Before you think of anyone famous, let me stop you right there. I'm just an ordinary guy from Denver, Colorado, and this isn't a story about championships or fame. It's a story about the greatest victory of my life, and the hardest lesson I ever had to learn. If someone had told me 4 years ago that one random Saturday morning would completely change my future, I would have laughed. Back then, I believed life was simple: work hard, pay the bills, spend weekends with friends. Repeat. Love wasn't something I was looking for anymore. At 30 years old, I had already experienced enough disappointment to convince myself that real relationships only happened in movies. Every serious relationship I'd had ended the same way. Either I worked too much, or we simply wanted different things. So I buried myself in my career. I worked as a structural engineer for one of Denver's largest construction companies. I loved designing buildings that would stand for decades. There was something satisfying about creating something permanent in a world where everything else seemed temporary. My weekdays started before sunrise and often ended after dark. The only promise I made to myself was that every Saturday morning belonged to me. No emails, no phone calls, no meetings. Just coffee and a walk through Washington Park, one of my favorite places in Denver. That Saturday in early May felt different somehow. The sky was bright blue. The Rocky Mountains stood proudly on the horizon. Families were walking their dogs. Cyclists raced past smiling couples. Children laughed near the lake. Everything felt peaceful. I grabbed a large caramel latte from a small coffee truck parked near the entrance to the park and started walking toward the water. That's when everything went wrong. Or maybe, everything finally went right. A golden retriever suddenly ran across the path, chasing a tennis ball. Trying not to step on the dog, I stumbled. The coffee flew straight out of my hand. Time seemed to slow down. The cup spun through the air and landed directly on someone's white sweater. Oh my God, I froze. Standing in front of me was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. She looked down at her sweater, now covered in coffee stains, before slowly raising her eyes toward me. For 2 terrifying seconds, I expected her to yell. Instead, she started laughing. Not a fake laugh. A real one. The kind that makes your eyes sparkle. "I guess your coffee liked me more than you did," she joked. I couldn't believe it. "I'm so sorry. I'll pay for the sweater." I wasn't looking. I swear I usually don't attack strangers with coffee. She laughed even harder. That's a relief. I was beginning to think this was some strange Denver tradition. I couldn't help laughing, too. "My name's Mike," she smiled. "Sophia Smith." She held out her hand as if nothing unusual had happened. I shook it. Her hand was warm despite the chilly morning air. "I'm really embarrassed," I admitted. "You should be," she teased. Then she smiled again. "But accidents happen." I offered to buy her another coffee as an apology. She looked at the stained sweater. "I guess it can't get much worse. Lead the way." 5 minutes later, we were sitting outside a small cafe overlooking the park. She had changed into a gray hoodie she'd kept in her backpack. "I always carry extra clothes," she explained. "I spill things." I laughed. "So today wasn't my fault?" "Oh, it was definitely your fault. But apparently I'm prepared for people like you." Our conversation flowed effortlessly. She had recently moved to Denver after accepting a position as a graphic designer for an outdoor clothing company. She loved hiking, photography, books, road trips, national parks. I told her about my obsession with mountain trails and weekend camping trips. When I mentioned my favorite hiking route near Estes Park, her eyes lit up. "No way. I was there last month." We spent nearly 2 hours talking without either of us checking our phones. That had never happened to me before. Normally, conversations with strangers felt forced. With Sophia, everything felt natural, like we'd known each other for years. Eventually, she glanced at her watch. "Oh no, my sister is going to kill me. You forgot? I was supposed to meet her 40 minutes ago." She grabbed her phone. 23 missed calls. I tried not to laugh. "That's impressive." She covered her face with both hands. "This is so embarrassing." She called her sister immediately. I could hear someone yelling through the speaker. Even though Sophia held the phone, away from her ear. I'm alive. No, I wasn't kidnapped. Someone spilled coffee on me. She paused. No, don't blame him. Another pause, actually. She looked at me and grinned. Maybe blame him a little. After hanging up, she sighed dramatically. My sister now thinks you're either incredibly charming, or incredibly dangerous. Which one are you? I honestly don't know. She smiled. I guess I'll have to find out. Before leaving, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook. She tore out a page. Instead of asking for my number, she wrote hers down. If you're planning to spill another coffee on me, dunce, at least give me some warning first. I laughed. I'll text you. You'd better. She walked away toward the parking lot. Halfway there, she turned around. Mike? Yeah? I'm glad you spilled that coffee. Then she disappeared around the corner. I stood there for several minutes, holding the piece of paper with her phone number. I couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about work. I wasn't thinking about deadlines. I wasn't thinking about tomorrow. I was thinking about a woman I'd known for only 2 hours. Little did I know, that piece of paper would become the beginning of the greatest love story of my life, and also the beginning of the most painful journey I would ever face. I couldn't stop thinking about Sophia, the entire drive home. Her laugh echoed in my head. Every time I pictured the coffee splashing across her white sweater, I cringed, yet somehow, what should have been the most embarrassing moment of my life had turned into the best morning I'd had in years. I looked at the piece of paper with her phone number at least 20 times that afternoon. I typed a message, deleted it, typed another, deleted that one too. At 29, I suddenly felt like an awkward teenager. Finally, around 7 that evening, I sent it. Hey Sophia, it's Mike, the guy who declared war on your sweater. I was wondering if I could make it up to you with dinner this Friday? For 10 long minutes there was no reply. Then my phone buzzed. Only if you promise to keep all beverages on your side of the table. I laughed out loud. Deal. Friday at 7? See you then. The entire week seemed, for the first time in months, I actually looked forward to Friday instead of the weekend being just another chance to catch up on work. My coworkers noticed something had changed. You've been smiling all week, my friend and colleague Daniel said during lunch. Did you win the lottery? No. You finally taking a vacation? No. He leaned back in his chair. So, it's a woman. I sighed. Is it that obvious? He grinned. You've answered 3 emails with have a great day. You never do that. Friday evening finally arrived. I spent almost an hour deciding what to wear. 3 different shirts, 2 jackets, 5 minutes wondering if the blue one made me look too formal. I even watched a YouTube video titled, What Should Men Wear on a First Date? By the time I left my apartment, I was already running 5 minutes late. Traffic in downtown Denver wasn't helping. When I finally reached the Italian restaurant I'd booked, my heart dropped. The lights were off, the doors were locked. A handwritten sign hung on the window, closed for private event. What? I stared at my phone. The reservation confirmation clearly said Friday at 7. I checked again, then I noticed the date. Next Friday. I had booked the wrong week. Seriously, Mike? I buried my face in my hands. At that exact moment, Sophia walked up behind me. She looked from me, to the locked restaurant, and back to me. Please tell me this is part of some creative first date experience. I sighed. I wish. She started laughing. You forgot the reserve. I booked it. I paused. For next Friday. She blinked, then burst into laughter so hard she had to lean against the wall. I expected her to be annoyed. Instead, she wiped tears from her eyes. This is actually kind of adorable. Please don't use that word. Oh, I'm definitely using that word. I've never seen anyone accidentally reserve a date for the future. I shook my head. I'm already losing points. You haven't lost any. She smiled warmly. You've just given me a funny story to tell someday. After walking around for a few minutes, we found a small family-owned burger restaurant a few blocks away. It wasn't fancy. No candles. No expensive menu. Just great food and live country music playing quietly in the background. Oddly enough, it felt perfect. Over burgers and fries, we talked for hours. I learned Sophia had grown up in Colorado Springs. Her parents still lived there. She had one younger sister named Emma, who apparently loved teasing her about dating. Sophia admitted she'd almost canceled our dinner. Really? She nodded. I've been on some terrible first dates. How terrible? She counted on her fingers. One guy spent 2 hours talking about cryptocurrency. I laughed. Another brought his mother. What? I wish I were joking. And one spent the entire dinner texting another woman. Ouch. So, she smiled, you're already doing much better. As the evening went on, we discovered something unexpected. Neither of us liked roller coasters. Both of us loved thunderstorms. We both preferred road trips over flying. We both secretly enjoyed old country songs. And somehow, we both hated mushrooms on pizza. What are the odds? I asked. She shrugged. Either we're incredibly compatible, or we're both just weird. I vote for the first one. She smiled but looked away. For a brief moment, there was silence. Not uncomfortable silence. The kind where neither person feels the need to fill every second with words. I noticed a loose strand of hair blowing across her face from the ceiling fan. Without thinking, I almost reached to move it aside. Then I stopped myself. Too soon. She caught the movement anyway. You were going to fix my hair. I laughed nervously. Maybe. She tucked it behind her ear herself. That's sweet. My face immediately turned red. She noticed. Oh my goodness. You're blushing. I don't blush. You absolutely do. She laughed again. I'm keeping this information. After dinner, we walked through downtown Denver. The city lights reflected in the windows of the buildings, and the warm summer air made everything feel calm. Street musicians played soft music. People sat outside cafes talking late into the evening. Without realizing it, Sophia moved a little closer to me. Our shoulders brushed. Neither of us stepped away. Then, while crossing a busy street, she instinctively reached for my hand. It happened naturally. Neither of us said anything. We simply kept walking. A few seconds later, she looked down, then back at me. I guess we're holding hands now. I guess we are. Neither of us let go. At that moment, I had a feeling that this wasn't just another first date. It felt like the beginning of something much bigger. But neither of us knew that life has a strange way of testing people just when they begin to fall in love. And our very first test was much closer than we could have imagined. Looking back now, I think the happiest moments in life are also the most dangerous, not because something bad is happening, but because you start believing nothing ever will. That's exactly where Sophia and I were. After our first date, everything seemed effortless. We texted every morning. We called almost every night. If one of us found a new coffee shop, the other was there by the weekend. If there was a hiking trail we hadn't explored, we'd pack our backpacks and disappear into the Colorado mountains for the day. Somehow, life just felt lighter whenever she was around. About a month after we met, Sophia invited me to join her on a Saturday hike in Rocky Mountain National Park. She insisted she knew a trail with one of the most beautiful overlooks in Colorado. You trust me? She asked. I've survived one coffee disaster and one restaurant disaster. I think I can survive a hike. She laughed. Good answer. The morning couldn't have been more perfect. The sky was clear. The air smelled of pine trees. The mountains looked endless. Sophia walked ahead of me, occasionally stopping to take pictures of wildflowers or the snow-covered peaks in the distance. She had this habit of getting excited over the smallest things. A butterfly, a deer crossing the trail, an old wooden bridge. She made me notice details I'd spent years walking past. About halfway up the trail, we stopped to eat lunch beside a small lake. The water was so still it reflected the mountains like a mirror. This, Sophia said quietly, is my favorite place in Colorado. I looked around. No wonder. She smiled. No. Then she looked at me. I meant sharing it with someone. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. On the hike back down, something happened that completely caught me off guard. My phone rang. It was my boss. Normally, I ignored work calls on weekends. But this project was different. We were days away from presenting a multi-million-dollar proposal. I have to take this, I told Sophia. No problem. I stepped away. The 5-minute phone call became 15, then 20, then nearly 40. When I finally hung up, Sophia was sitting alone on a rock. She wasn't angry, she was just quiet. "I'm sorry," I said. "It couldn't wait." She nodded. "I know." But something in her voice had changed. The drive back to Denver felt different. The conversation wasn't flowing anymore. We still talked, but there were long pauses. Finally, she looked out the passenger window. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." If work always comes first, she hesitated. Where would someone like me fit? Her question hit harder than I expected. "I never said work comes first. You didn't have to." I frowned. "That's not fair, isn't it? You answered your boss immediately. You spent almost 40 minutes talking about blueprints. We were standing in one of the most beautiful places in Colorado, and you weren't really there." I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. "You know how important my job is." "I do. But I'm asking if there's room for anything else." Neither of us spoke for several miles. The silence became uncomfortable. Finally, I said something I immediately regretted. "I think you're overreacting." The moment the words left my mouth, I wished I could take them back. Sophia slowly turned toward me. "I'm overreacting? No, that's not what I meant. It sounded exactly like what you meant. You know what?" She looked back out the window. "Forget it." When I dropped her off at her apartment, she smiled politely. But it wasn't the same smile. "Thank you for today, Sophia. I'm just tired. I'll call you tomorrow." She nodded. "Good night, Mike." She closed the door. For the first time since we'd met, she didn't hug me goodbye. That night, I barely slept. I replayed the conversation over and over. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had spent too much time working. Maybe I'd made her feel invisible. The next morning, I texted her. "Good morning. I owe you an apology." Nothing. An hour passed. Still nothing. By noon, I called. No answer. Around 4 in the afternoon, she finally replied. "I'm spending today with my family in Colorado Springs. We'll talk tomorrow." It wasn't a cold message, but it wasn't warm either. The next day at work, I couldn't concentrate. Daniel noticed immediately. "You two had your first fight? How did you know?" He laughed. "Because every relationship has one." "What was it about?" "Work." He nodded knowingly. "Let me guess. You said she was overreacting." I stared at him. "How did you know that?" "Because every man says that once, and every man regrets it immediately." That evening, I drove to Sophia's apartment without calling first. I carried a small bouquet of wildflowers I'd picked up from a local florist. When she opened the door, she looked surprised. "I know you said we'd talk later. But I don't want later." She crossed her arms. "I'm listening." I took a deep breath. I was wrong. I wasn't really listening to you. I kept defending myself instead of understanding why you were hurt. She didn't say anything. "I don't want you competing with my job. I want you beside me." There was a long silence. Finally, she smiled just a little. "You really rehearsed that speech, didn't you?" I laughed. "About 15 times in the car. I could tell." Then she stepped closer. "I'm not asking you to quit your job. I just don't want to feel like I'm always in second place." "You won't. I promise." She looked into my eyes. "Be careful with promises, Mike. They're easy to make and much harder to keep." Then she wrapped her arms around me. I hugged her tightly. Relief washed over me. The argument was over, or so I thought. Because neither of us realized that this small disagreement wasn't the real problem. It was only the first tiny crack in a relationship that was about to face challenges neither of us could have imagined. People often think relationships fall apart because of one huge mistake. That's rarely true. Most of the time, it starts with small misunderstandings, little disappointments, unspoken feelings. Sophia and I had made up after our argument about work, and for a while everything felt normal again. In fact, it felt even better. We were communicating more. I stopped answering work calls during our dates. She stopped assuming the worst whenever my schedule became busy. For nearly 2 months, life felt almost perfect. Then she asked me a question that made me unexpectedly nervous. "Would you like to meet my parents next weekend?" I smiled. "I'd love to." At least, that was my first answer. My second thought was pure panic. Meeting someone's parents suddenly made everything feel more serious. This wasn't just dating anymore. This was the first step toward becoming part of each other's lives. Her parents lived just outside Colorado Springs in a beautiful house surrounded by pine trees. The drive from Denver took a little over an hour. During the trip, Sophia kept reassuring me, "They're going to love you." "I hope so. My dad is friendly." "Great. My mom," she paused, "asks a lot of questions." "How many questions?" She smiled. "You'll see." Wanting to make a good first impression, I stopped at a local bakery and bought a homemade apple pie. Sophia approved immediately. "My mom loves apple pie. I finally did something right." She laughed. "Don't celebrate yet." When we arrived, her father, Richard Smith, welcomed me with a firm handshake. "So you're the famous Mike." I blinked. "Famous? Sophia has mentioned you more than once." Sophia immediately rolled her eyes. "Dad? What?" "I'm just telling the truth." Then her mother, Linda, hugged Sophia before smiling politely at me. "It's nice to finally meet you." She seemed kind, but observant, very observant. Within 10 minutes she had asked me where I grew up, what my parents did, how long I'd worked as an engineer, whether I wanted children, if I enjoyed cooking, how often I attended family gatherings, and whether I planned to stay in Colorado permanently. I quietly counted 12 questions before dinner. Sophia caught me counting on my fingers. She almost laughed. Dinner itself started well. Richard loved talking about fishing. We discovered we both followed the Denver Broncos. Linda served homemade lasagna that was honestly one of the best meals I'd ever had. I began relaxing. Maybe this wasn't so scary after all. Then, the conversation shifted. Linda looked directly at me. "So Mike, where do you see yourself in 5 years?" I answered honestly, "I'd like to become a project director. Maybe even start my own engineering company someday." She nodded. "Sophia, what about her? Where does she fit into those plans?" I hesitated, not because I didn't care, because I hadn't expected the question. I looked toward Sophia. I haven't planned everything that far. The room suddenly became quiet. Too quiet. Sophia smiled politely. But I recognized that smile. It was the same one she'd worn after our first argument. Richard quickly changed the subject. "So, anyone want dessert?" Everyone agreed a little too quickly. The tension eased, but it never completely disappeared. Later that evening, Sophia and I walked outside while her parents cleaned up the kitchen. The Colorado sunset painted the sky orange and purple. For a while, neither of us spoke. Finally, she broke the silence. "My mom embarrassed you." "A little. I'm sorry." "It's okay." "No." She looked down. "It's not." Then she sighed. "But..." "What?" "I was waiting for your answer too." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "When Mom asked where I fit into your future." I realized I didn't know either. My stomach tightened. "I've only known you for a few months. I'm asking if you've ever imagined one." Her words caught me completely off guard. Of course I'd imagined a future, but only privately. I wasn't ready to talk about it yet. At least, that's what I thought. "I don't know." The second those words left my mouth, I saw disappointment flash across her face. "You don't know. It isn't that simple." "It actually is." She folded her arms. "You either see a future with me, or you don't." "I do." "Then why couldn't you say it?" "I wasn't ready." She nodded slowly. "Thank you for being honest." There was something about the way she said it that hurt. It sounded less like gratitude and more like resignation. The drive back to Denver was almost silent. The music played softly in the background. Neither of us sang along like we usually did. When we reached her apartment, she unbuckled her seatbelt but didn't open the door right away. "Mike?" "Yeah? I think we're moving at different speeds." "What does that mean?" She looked out the window before answering. "It means I'm falling in love with you." My heart skipped a beat, and I don't know if you're ready to fall with me. I wanted to answer. I wanted to tell her exactly how I felt. But the words got stuck. She waited. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, too long. Finally, she smiled sadly. "I guess that's my answer." She stepped out of the car. I watched her walk toward her apartment building without looking back. For the first time since we'd met, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Fear. Not fear of losing my job. Not fear of failing. Fear of losing the woman who had completely changed my life. And deep down, I knew that if I didn't find the courage to tell Sophia how I truly felt, someone else eventually would. There are moments in life that stay with you forever. Not because something terrible happens, but because, for the first time, you realize you could lose someone you love. That realization came on an ordinary Tuesday evening. 3 days had passed since we visited Sophia's parents. 3 days since she told me she was falling in love with me. And 3 days since I had stood there, unable to say the words she needed to hear. We still texted. We still talked. But something had changed. The conversations felt shorter. The pauses lasted longer. She still smiled, but not the way she used to. Wednesday afternoon, I decided to surprise her. She had mentioned she was working late, so I stopped by her office with her favorite caramel cheesecake from a bakery she loved. I imagined her face lighting up when she saw me. Instead, as I walked toward the building, I froze. Sophia was standing outside. She was laughing. Across from her stood a tall man in a navy suit, holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one. She smiled. Then he brushed a loose strand of hair away from her face. I felt something twist inside my chest. Who was he? I stayed across the street, watching longer than I should have. They continued talking, laughing. A few moments later, they hugged goodbye. The man walked toward the parking garage. Sophia went back inside. I looked down at the cheesecake in my hands. Suddenly, it didn't feel like a surprise anymore. It felt unnecessary. Without thinking, I turned around and walked back to my truck. That night, Sophia called me. "Hey," she said cheerfully. "How was your day?" "It was fine." "Just fine?" "Yeah." There was a brief silence. "You sound tired." "Long day, I understand." Another pause. Then she asked, "Are we still hiking this weekend?" "I might have to work." The words came out colder than I intended. "Oh, if you have to." She sounded disappointed. "I'll let you know." "Okay." After we hung up, I stared at my phone. Why hadn't I asked her who that man was? Why was I acting like everything was fine? The truth was simple. I was afraid of the answer. The next morning, Daniel found me staring at my computer screen. "You've been looking at the same blueprint for 20 minutes. "I have?" "What's going on?" I told him everything. The office, the coffee, the hug, the guy. Daniel leaned back in his chair. "So, you didn't ask her?" "No. You just assumed the worst?" He shook his head. "Mike, I've known you for 6 years, you're smart. But when it comes to relationships, you're an idiot." I couldn't even argue. Saturday finally arrived. Sophia texted me early that morning. "Ready for our hike?" I stared at the message. Part of me wanted to cancel. Another part wanted answers. I picked her up at 9. The drive to Boulder was almost immediately. "Okay, what?" "Something's wrong." "Nothing's wrong." She raised an eyebrow. "Mike, I know you. Talk to me." I kept my eyes on the road. "I stopped by your office Wednesday." She looked surprised. "You did?" "I saw you." She frowned. "Saw me?" "The guy with the coffee." Silence. Then she sighed. "Oh, so that's what this is. What exactly is this?" She turned toward me. "His name is Ethan." My stomach tightened. "He's our new marketing director. He just moved here from Seattle." I nodded. And that's it." I looked at her. "He touched your hair." She blinked. "What?" "He brushed your hair." She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Mike, there was a leaf caught in it." I said nothing. She crossed her arms. "You seriously thought I didn't know what to think? You could have asked me." "I know." "No." She shook her head. "You didn't trust me enough to ask." Her voice wasn't angry anymore. It was hurt. We reached the trailhead, but neither of us got out of the truck. Sophia looked straight ahead. "I've never given you a reason to doubt me." "I know." "So why did you?" "I was scared." She finally looked at me. "Of what?" "That someone better would come along." She stared at me for several seconds. Then something in her expression softened. "Mike." She reached for my hand. "I chose to have dinner with you. I chose to spend weekends with you. I chose to introduce you to my parents. I keep choosing you." Her words hit me harder than any argument ever could. "I know." "No." She squeezed my hand gently. "I don't think you do." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, I took a deep breath. "I'm sorry. I should have trusted you." "You should have." "I let my imagination create a story that wasn't real," smiled Tanspa, sadly. "And next time, I'll ask, instead of assuming." She nodded. "Good." Then she laughed quietly. "You know what? Ethan is happily married." I blinked. What? She burst into laughter. His wife works in the office next to mine. I covered my face with my hands. You've got to be kidding. I'm not. I spent 3 days jealous of a married man. You did. She couldn't stop laughing. Eventually, I started laughing too. It was embarrassing, but it also reminded me of something important. Trust isn't built by never feeling insecure. It's built by choosing honesty before assumptions. We spent the rest of the afternoon hiking through the Flatirons, talking about everything and nothing. The tension slowly disappeared. By sunset, it almost felt like ourselves again. Almost. Because while we had overcome our first real misunderstanding, life was quietly preparing a much bigger challenge. One that neither jealousy nor apologies could fix. A challenge that would test not just our trust, but our future together. People often believe that love is tested by betrayal. Don't. I think love is tested by choices. The hardest choices aren't between right and wrong. They're between two good things that can't exist at the same time. That's exactly where Sophia and I found ourselves only a few months after we met. After our misunderstanding about Ethan, our relationship became stronger. We promised each other something simple. No more assumptions. If something bothered us, we'd talk about it. It sounded easy. In reality, keeping that promise would become one of the hardest things we'd ever done. Autumn arrived in Colorado. The trees around Denver turned brilliant shades of gold and red. Sophia and I spent nearly every weekend together. Sometimes we'd drive through the mountains just to watch the changing colors. Other weekends we'd stay home, cook dinner together, and argue over which movie to watch. She loved romantic comedies. I preferred action movies. We usually ended up watching neither. Instead, we'd spend hours talking on the couch until midnight. Those became my favorite nights. One Thursday morning, everything changed. I was called into the office of our company's president. At first, I thought something was wrong. Instead, he smiled. "Mike, sit down." I did. "I have good news." He slid a folder across the desk. "We've been watching your work for the past 3 years. You've earned this." Inside the folder was an offer. Senior Project Director. It was the promotion I'd been chasing for years, a salary increase, a company vehicle, a leadership position, everything I'd worked toward. Then I read the last page. Location, Dallas, Texas. I looked back at him. "Dallas?" He nodded. "We're opening a new regional office. We want you to lead it." "When?" "In 6 weeks." I drove home in complete silence. I should have been celebrating. Instead, my stomach was in knots. 6 weeks. How was I supposed to tell Sophia? That evening, she came over to my apartment, carrying takeout from our favorite Mexican restaurant. She immediately noticed something was wrong. "Okay, what happened?" I forced a smile. "I got promoted." Her eyes lit up. "Mike," she threw her arms around me. "I knew you would. I'm so proud of you." For a few seconds, I smiled too. Then she noticed my expression change. "What aren't you telling me?" I took a deep breath. "The job is in Dallas." Her smile slowly disappeared. Oh, the room suddenly felt very quiet. "For how long?" she asked softly. "I'd be running the entire office." "So, permanent?" I nodded. She looked down at the floor. Neither of us spoke for almost a minute. Finally, she whispered, "When would you leave?" 6 weeks. She slowly sat down on the couch. 6 weeks. The words seemed to echo through the room. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "I don't either." She looked at me. "You've dreamed about this job." "I know. You deserve it." But she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I already knew what she was thinking. "What about us?" she finally asked. I had asked myself that same question all afternoon. I don't know. Those 3 words hurt both of us. Again, she stood up and walked toward the window. "I just started building my career here." "I know. My parents are here." "I know. My whole life is in Colorado." "I know." She turned around. "And your whole future is suddenly in Texas." For the next hour, we talked in circles, long distance, flying every weekend, one of us eventually moving, waiting a year, changing jobs. Every solution created another problem. There were no easy answers. A week passed. Neither of us had made a decision. One evening, Daniel invited me out for a beer after work. I feel miserable." "So what's the plan?" "I honestly don't know." He took a sip of his drink. "Can I tell you something?" "Sure." I turned down a promotion once. I looked at him in surprise. You did? 10 years ago. Why? My wife. Do you regret it? He thought for a moment. Sometimes. And sometimes I don't. He smiled. The point is, no one can make this decision except you. That weekend, Sophia suggested we drive to Red Rocks Park just before sunset. We sat on a large rock overlooking the valley below. Neither of us had spoken much during the drive. Finally, she broke the silence. I don't want to be the reason you give up your dream. I looked at her, and I don't want my dream to cost me the person I love. The words escaped before I even realized what I'd said. Sophia's eyes widened. You. I smiled nervously. I guess I finally said it. I love you, Sophia. For a second, she simply stared at me. Then tears filled her eyes. I've been waiting so long to hear those words. She wrapped her arms around me so tightly I could barely breathe. I love you too, Mike. For several minutes, we just stood there holding each other while the sun disappeared behind the Rocky Mountains. It should have been the happiest moment of our relationship, but reality was still waiting for us. The promotion deadline was only 5 days away, and by Friday, I would have to choose between the career I'd spent years building, or the woman who had become my entire world. People always say that life gives you opportunities only once. I used to believe that, but I've learned something different. Sometimes life gives you an opportunity, just to find out what matters more. 5 days, that was all I had to decide. Every morning I woke up convinced I knew what I was going to do. Every evening I changed my mind, accept the promotion, or stay in Colorado with Sophia. No matter how I looked at it, someone was going to get hurt. Monday morning arrived faster than I wanted. My boss stopped by my office. So, have you made your decision? Not yet. He smiled patiently. I understand. But headquarters needs an answer by Friday. I nodded. I'll have one. As he walked away, I stared out the window at the Denver skyline. For years, I had dreamed about becoming a project director. Now that dream felt heavier than ever. That evening, Sophia invited me over for dinner. She had cooked homemade chicken parmesan. Normally, we laughed while cooking together. This time, the apartment felt unusually quiet. Halfway through dinner, she finally spoke. I've been thinking. I put my fork down. So have I. She took a deep breath. If moving to Dallas is what you truly want, I'll support you. I looked at her in disbelief. You would? She nodded slowly. I love you. And loving someone sometimes means encouraging them to follow their dreams. I reached across the table and took her hand. What if my dream has changed? She smiled sadly. Don't say that because of me. I'm not. I'm saying it because it's true. The rest of the evening felt lighter. We talked about everything except Texas. It was almost like we were pretending Friday didn't exist. When I drove home, I realized something. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about the promotion. I was thinking about the future I wanted to build. And every version of that future included Sophia. Wednesday brought another surprise. I received a phone call from my younger sister Rachel. Mom's organizing a family barbecue this weekend. You and Sophia are both coming. I don't know if. No excuses. Everyone wants to meet her. Sophia had only met my sister once. She'd never met the rest of my family. I hoped it would be a relaxing day. I couldn't have been more wrong. Saturday afternoon, my parents' backyard was full of relatives. My uncles were grilling burgers. Kids were running around with water balloons. Country music played quietly through outdoor speakers. Sophia fit in almost immediately. She laughed with my cousins, helped my mother in the kitchen, even joined a cornhole tournament with my nephews. Watching her with my family made something crystal clear. She already felt like part of it. Then came my Uncle Frank. Every family has one person who asks questions nobody wants to answer. Ours was Frank. He walked over carrying a soda and grinned. So? He looked directly at Sophia. When's the wedding? Sophia nearly choked on her lemonade. I laughed awkwardly. We're not there yet, Frank. So, Mike, you buying a ring soon? Before I could answer, my mother interrupted. Frank, leave them alone. But the damage was done. Sophia smiled politely, yet I could tell she felt uncomfortable. Later that evening, we sat alone on the back porch while everyone else stayed inside. I liked your family, Sophia said. They liked you too. She smiled. I think your mom already considers me family, I noticed. Then she became quiet. Frank's question. I sighed. Yeah, it made me think. About what? She looked out across the yard. About whether we're actually moving toward the same future. I turned toward her. I told you I love you. I know, but love isn't the only thing that builds a life together. Her words weren't angry. They were honest. The next morning, I finally made my decision. I drove to the office early. My boss invited me into his office. So? I took a deep breath. I can't move to Dallas. He looked surprised. You're turning down the promotion? Yes. He remained silent for a moment. Then he nodded. I had a feeling. You did? He smiled. When a man spends a week looking as miserable as you have, it's usually because someone means more to him than his career. I laughed quietly. I guess that's true. He stood up and shook my hand. I respect your decision, thank you. But, he smiled, don't assume this is your last opportunity. Those words stayed with me. That afternoon, I drove straight to Sophia's apartment. She opened the door, wearing one of my old hoodies she'd borrowed weeks earlier. You look happy. I am. What happened? I smiled. I turned it down. Her expression changed instantly. You. What? I chose Colorado. I chose us. For several seconds she simply stared at me. She threw her arms around me. You didn't have to do that. I know. I wanted to, she cried quietly against my shoulder. I promise, I whispered. I'll never make you feel like you're competing with my job again. She looked up at me. Promise me something too. Anything. If another opportunity comes someday, we'll decide together. I smiled. Together. She kissed me. At that moment, I honestly believed the hardest part of our relationship was behind us. I believed love had won. I believed nothing could separate us now. I was wrong. Because just 2 weeks later, Sophia received a phone call that would change both of our lives. And this time, the decision wouldn't be mine. Looking back now, I realize something ironic. Just when I thought I had proven my love by choosing Sophia over my career, life decided to ask her the very same question. Only this time, I wasn't the one waiting for an answer. 2 weeks after I turned down the promotion, life finally felt normal again. The stress was gone. The uncertainty had disappeared. Sophia and I slipped back into our routine. Friday night dinners, Saturday hikes, lazy Sunday mornings with coffee on my apartment balcony overlooking downtown Denver. For the first time in months, we weren't worrying about tomorrow. We were simply enjoying today. That's exactly why I wasn't prepared for what happened next. It was a Thursday evening. Sophia had come over after work. We were cooking tacos together. Well, she was cooking. I was mostly trying not to burn the tortillas. She laughed as she gently pushed me away from the stove. You know, I think you're dangerous around open flames. I built bridges. And yet somehow, you can't heat a tortilla. I have many talents. Cooking isn't one of them. She laughed so hard, she nearly dropped the bowl of vegetables. Moments like these made me realize why I loved her. Life never felt complicated when she smiled. Then her phone rang. She looked at the screen. Her expression immediately changed. It's my boss, she answered. Hi, Karen. I kept setting the table while she talked. At first, everything sounded normal. Then, Sophia stopped moving. She looked at me, then back toward the window. She didn't say a single word for almost a minute. Finally, I understand. Thank you. I'll think about it. She hung up. The apartment suddenly became very quiet. What happened? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she slowly sat down at the kitchen table. My company, she swallowed nervously, is opening a new creative studio. That's great. She nodded. It is. I smiled. So why do you look like someone just fired you? She looked straight into my eyes. Because it's in New York. My smile disappeared. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. The only sound in the apartment was the sizzling food still cooking on the stove. They want me to lead the design team. When? In 2 months. I couldn't believe it. Only weeks earlier, I'd faced the exact same situation. Now it was her turn. Sophia looked at me carefully. I know what you're thinking. Do you? You think I'm going to say no. I stayed quiet. She sighed. Mike, this has been my dream since college. I know. I've worked 5 years for an opportunity like this. I know. I don't want to lose it. I know. Every answer sounded the same. Every answer hurt. That night, neither of us slept much. She stayed at my apartment. Around 3 in the morning, I woke up and noticed her sitting alone on the balcony wrapped in a blanket. I walked outside. You couldn't sleep either? She smiled weakly. No. I sat beside her. The Denver skyline glowed beneath the stars. I've been thinking, she whispered. So have I. She leaned her head against my shoulder. I'm scared. Me too. I'm scared that no matter what I choose, I'll regret it. I wrapped my arm around her. You won't face it alone. The next evening, Sophia invited me to dinner. She had made my favorite homemade lasagna. Halfway through the meal, she looked unusually serious. I need to ask you something. Anything. If I accept New York, would you come with me? The question caught me completely off guard. I put my fork down. Move? Leave Colorado? Leave my family, my friends, the company where I'd spent nearly 7 years. Everything familiar. It wasn't a small decision. It was a completely different life. For a moment, I couldn't answer. Sophia lowered her eyes. I understand. No. I reached across the table. You don't. I'm not afraid of moving. I'm afraid of making another decision without thinking. She looked back at me. I don't want either of us to sacrifice our dreams, I continued. I don't want us keeping score. I gave this up. You gave that up. That's not love. She squeezed my hand. So, what do we do? I smiled softly. For once, we make the decision together. That weekend, we rented a cabin near Estes Park. No phones, no emails, no distractions. Just the two of us. We spent 2 days walking through pine forests, sitting beside quiet lakes, and talking honestly about our future. Not arguing, not convincing, just listening. For the first time, we weren't trying to win the conversation. We were trying to understand each other. By Sunday evening, we finally had an answer, one that neither of us had expected. But before we could put our plan into action, life had one more surprise waiting for us. A surprise that neither promotion nor distance could have prepared us for. Because on the drive back to Denver, a single phone call from Sophia's mother changed everything. And after that call, our lives would never be the same again.